Do our major cities have a problem with pedestrians? Statistics show that so far this year, there's been an increase in the number of pedestrians killed in New South Wales, Victoria and Queensland.
Yes, very startling news, and some are pointing the finger at drivers, saying they have become way too entitled. Ben Rossiter is the Executive Officer of the pedestrian advocacy group Victoria Walks, and he joins us now from one of Melbourne's busiest pedestrian hotspots, appropriately. Ben, very good morning to you.
Good morning, Michael.
We've had this spike in pedestrian deaths, 29 so far in New South Wales, which is double the amount compared to this time last year. What is behind that in your view?
Well, the pedestrian deaths have gone up this year nationally. There were about 204 died in 2007, went up down to about 150 in 2013. They're travelling about 175 at the moment. So they do fluctuate year by year, and we won't really know if there's a changed trend until we look at what happens over the longer term. But in Victoria, there's a key thing we know that already, if we look at over the 5 years or so, that 10% of the population are people over 75, but they're 33% of pedestrian deaths. And in this year alone, there are about 45% of pedestrian deaths. So we know that seniors are spiking, unfortunately, in Victoria.
Why is that?
Well, I think it comes down to two things, as research clearly shows. It's poor road design or driver behaviour. The Transport Accident Commission in Victoria looked at crashes with seniors and found they were at fault in only about 12% of crashes.
OK, and when you talk about poor driver behaviour, undoubtedly you are hearing lots of stories about motorists behaving badly. Take us through some examples there of motorists doing the wrong things at intersections that may not necessarily kill people but cause some distress to pedestrians.
Yeah, we know we did some research, or commissioned research, into senior pedestrian road crashes. We found the most common crash scenario is right-turning vehicle, and the second most common is left-turning. And they're both where drivers should be giving way. So intersections particularly are dangerous for senior pedestrians who are doing the right thing and they're hit by drivers who are not.
I guess, and you can apply that to most pedestrians. What is it, a case of drivers, not all drivers of course, but some drivers being a bit too impatient, a bit too selfish?
Yeah, that's it. We also know that some drivers don't have a really good understanding of their obligations to give way when turning. That's quite clear. But also our roads are designed for cars to, facilitate car travel. They're designed for, if you like, people in cars, the canned people. They're not designed for the fresh people, the people on feet. So we know that you'll have wide turning circles. We know at intersections there's things like we don't have controlled right turns, which means it's red for cars to turn while pedestrians are going across. Things like our traffic timing, the timing of our lights are really bad for pedestrians. The average traffic light speed for a walker is 1.2 metres per second, but seniors travel on average about 0.9 metres per second, so they don't have enough time to get across at the formal crossings. OK, so a simple case of increasing the time that green walk signal flashes up at pedestrian crossings. Yeah, that's one of them. But we also, across the network, we need to reduce the distance that pedestrians, particularly seniors, have to get across roads. We need to make them far more conspicuous, and we need to particularly slow down traffic speed in our residential and high pedestrian areas. Our traffic speeds are very high by international standards when we compare to the countries that do very well for pedestrians and walkers and people. So would you favour, and the argument's been made before, uniform, say 40 km an hour speeds in built-up areas? Yeah, 40 kilometres an hour in built-up areas and residential areas. And areas like where I am now in the Melbourne CBD and all the CBDs around the city, it really should be 30 kilometres an hour. Right. And possibly even in the side lanes, like in Melbourne, we have Flinders Lane, Little Bourke, Little Collins. They probably should be down to about 20. So we're still too high. And I'll go back to seniors. 75% of their crashes occur in 50 to 60 kilometre an hour roads. Yep. Now, driver behaviour obviously needs to be addressed. Is it the case, and I speak from personal experience here, Ben, that a lot of pedestrians, let's say younger pedestrians, aren't really self-aware of roads themselves? You'll see lots of... Michael, I'm just saying, speaking of traffic, lots of younger pedestrians I've noticed driving around, and I drive a lot, that are simply, for want of a better term, self-absorbed. They often wear headphones. So should there be education aimed at pedestrians as well? Well, there's not a lot of data showing that that's a major issue. We know that drivers' distraction is major. And let's go back to the seniors. You know, the 45% of seniors, pedestrians who are seniors over 75 years killed in Victoria this year, they're not Snapchatting, they're not Facebooking, they're not updating and tweeting and updating profiles. They're just going about their daily business. So I think we've got to be careful, because often there is a culture of victim blaming. Unfortunately, in Victoria, there was a horrible incident where a 14-year-old girl was killed crossing a road at traffic lights by a hit-and-run truck last week. And some of the media outlets were pointing out she was wearing headphones. That has absolutely nothing to do with it if she was obeying the law, and all indications are she were. An example would be, you know, if a car's hit, stationary car at traffic lights is hit by a vehicle from behind, we don't say, oh, the driver was listening to music or they weren't looking in their rear view mirror. Yet when a pedestrian is hit on a crossing, we tend to look at how they're at fault.
I hear you, Ben Rossiter, and you've opened up a very interesting discussion this morning for our many viewers. So thank you for joining us, Ben Rossiter there from Victoria Walks.